Well, hello and welcome back to the channel. Today I am going around the flower farm and doing what a lot of growers are doing in the Northern Hemisphere at this time of year. I'm counting up stems for sale for Christmas floristry. Now, if you're new to the channel, you're very welcome. My name's Georgie. I'm a flower farmer and florist based between fashionable Bruton and up-and-coming Wincanton in sunny Somerset in southwest England, zone 8 hardiness. And my channel is all about growing flowers, arranging flowers, living a good, thoughtful life in tune with the seasons and the environment. And I hope that I give you lots of great tips and tricks as we go along. So if any of them are useful, you can always buy me a coffee, or better still, join my popular YouTube club. Links to coffee buying and club membership in the blurb to all my clips. Right, come along. There's a lot of chat on the social media and around the place about how the main flowering season for flower farmers like me is pretty much over now that we're the end of October. I choose, I'm not forced, I make a choice, to officially finish my season at the end of September. So my flower farming for blooms, if you like, goes from the 1st of April to the end of September. So I call myself a sunny side of the equinox flower farmer. And this is a choice that I make. I could carry on. There are flower farmers all over the UK, all over the world, who have flowers available for their locality all the way through the autumn. It is the season for nerine lilies, hesperanthus, asters. The first of the autumn flowering anemones are coming. I expect shortly there'll be a ranunculus crop. There are people in Cornwall who don't freeze and whose seasons go on much longer than mine. So the locally grown flower season is not finished. My locally grown flower season here at Common Farm is, because I make that choice. And I think it's really, really important when you're looking at small businesses that one never judges a business on the decisions that they make. One judges the business on whether it's functioning and the people who own it and run it can eat. Anyway, enough of that. So what am I going out to forage today? Well, we have a 7-acre plot here, and it is about 3 acres of it is cut flowers, and probably 2 is woodland that we've planted over the years. So half a mile of hedgerow, quite a lot of woody areas, lots of small orchards. These are great for the environment as well as my pocketbook, because I'm going to go out there and some of the things that we've got in our wooded areas, we call them the lugfall. Lugfall is an Old English word for the edge of the forest. And behind me, behind that wall, is the remains of the Selwood forest, which is one of the last forests still extant here in the British Isles, remaining from the end of the last ice age. So Selwood forest, which runs from Pen Selwood on the A303 all the way up to Frome, or used to run much wider and further than this, is the ancient forest of Selwood. So we have planted a bank of woodland around the edge of the plot here, and we call it the lugfall, which is the Old English word for the edge of the forest. And so a lot of that area has material that I'm going to be looking at for harvesting. I have a commission to make 250 little wreath bases, so I need to make sure that I've got 750 usable willow stems to make them, and I have got a big wholesale order, and I'm going to be walking around the garden looking at what I've got so that I can offer my customer all sorts of choices. Come along, let's go and have a look. Oh, I can never make this thing turn off. Now, I'm not an avid dried flower grower. there are people out there who grow many, many more, bigger, wider varieties than me, but it's almost impossible as a cut flower grower not to have some dried flowers. So I have collected, as the season's gone on, my allium purple sensation. I love this. This is Scabiosa ping pong. I got the seed from Higgledy Garden. This is Limonium, heaven. In vast quantities fresh in a wedding, it smells a bit cabbagey, but dried, it's really, really useful for a little kind of crunchy froth in a winter wreath, or a whole wreath made of it is just beautiful. This is the small Eryngium sea holly, which I grow, and it's called Silver Cup or something like that. I'll look it up and I'll put it in the blurb if I remember. I've got some poppy seed heads, some honesty, and down here, not very much because I use them so much fresh, but I've got a little bit of helichrysum, lovely dried flower, but lovely fresh too, so I tend to use them. And then down here on the floor, perhaps a bit unusual, and it's still drying. I need a small piece. Here we are. It gets very tangled up. It's still drying, I've only just harvested it. And this is Nicandra physaloides, or the shoe fly plant. And as you can see, the seed heads dry into these gorgeous gold shapes. So the leaves will just shrivel up to nothing. So I haven't pulled them off. I could have done, but I haven't. And I'll be left with lovely strings of these gorgeous seed heads. They're really lovely, unusual, dried material for Christmas wreaths. And you can see how that gold colour would be great in a wreath. If, like me, you make, my wreaths are 100% biodegradable. And if you'd like to know how to make one, you can come on one of my workshops. I have lots of wreathing demos coming up online, so book a place. No pressure. But so it doesn't look quite much now, but it is a really useful stem for cutting into wreaths. Now it's really important. I've had to remember. So I've got all of this here, and this is for sale, and then I've got some other that I've kept back because I do have some wreath commissions that I'm going to be making. So it's important that I don't sell the whole lot, but this is my for sale selection, and it's in the sun here because I've taken a photograph of it for my clients so they can see what I'm offering them. And but I will take it out of the sun now because the sun is very drying, and I don't want these lovely seed heads to start just falling apart. I'll keep them in the shade most of the time and they'll do better. I won't leave them in the sun like this. Right, come on, let's go on out. Now, flowering ivy, flowering at this time of year, is fantastic for the bees. All sorts of invertebrates, any flying invertebrates will be absolutely feasting on the nectar from the flowering ivy because it's a really good nectar source late in the season. So I'm leaving my flowering ivy here now, but by the time wreathing season really gets going in a month, all of this flowering ivy will have turned to berries, and berried ivy is much in demand. And so I've offered the side of my house to my client, and I have I have flowering ivy all the way up the side of my house. So we will have to get in somebody. We need to tidy up the ivy anyway. It's nice to have it going up the side of the house. It's an amazing resource for wildlife. In the summer we have blackbirds nesting in it, and we have all sorts of people live in there. But it still needs to be controlled a bit, otherwise it might pull the house down. So we will hire a cherry picker, take down the flowering ivy with a hedge trimmer, and while we're up there, tidy it up and make sure it's not getting into the roof space and, you know, organise it a little bit. It does need to be controlled, because otherwise my house will fall down on the other side as well as the other side, if you see what I mean. But it does look gorgeous, doesn't it, going up the side of the house like that? It's amazing. Lush, very lush. We planted quite a lot of different coloured willow when we first came here nearly 20 years ago, because the land here is more or less a marsh in the winter, and so we wanted to have something to help drain the land. And willow in Somerset grows incredibly well in our wet clay. So a neighbour was cutting back some of their willow from along their little stream running through their garden, and said, did we want any? So we literally walked up the road and dragged all this willow back and struck it in the ground, and it's now become a willow wood. When it's pollarded, can you see in the deep middle here, there is a round ball of where we've pollarded it in the past. When it's pollarded and it comes back, you get these green balls of fresh willow growth. It's very attractive, and the children used to call it the lollipop wood when they were little. Willow was one of the first trees to colonise the British Isles after the recession of the last ice age, at the same sort of time as oak. Got leaves going down my sleeves. And so they are host to enormous quantities of wildlife. And in the winter, I'll take you down, I'll show you, that you find fat colonies of aphids living deep near the crown of the tree where it's been pollarded. And imagine what a resource that is for the birds in the winter. So we have a lot of birds here in the winter because there's so much for them to eat. And we don't really feed the birds. Granny does, because she loves to have her bird feeding station, then she can watch them. We don't particularly feed the birds, but we do know that there's a huge amount of forage for them here, which is why they live here. So the willow serves me as a person making willow wreaths, but it also serves our environment. And if we can do that here at Common Farm with a lot of what we grow, then it makes us very happy, because then we can look after the invertebrates and the rest of the food chain will look after itself. Come on, I'll show you some aphids. Just as we're passing, can you see the new studio, the little bit of blue there? That's my new studio up the field. So this part of the Lugfall, we planted a row of hornbeam quite close together. I was very inspired by the garden at the house, which has now become the Newt. And there used to be this very, very beautiful garden. There's a parabola walled garden, a round walled garden there. And the wall is still there, I think. Although they've got rid of all the planting and started again. But in the middle of this walled garden, which was planted by a couple called the Popes as a colour wheel, as a colour garden. Gemma, one of my clubbers, if you can find the Pope's garden book about planting with colour based on their garden at Hadspen, it's really fabulous. Anyway, they had this walk down the middle of it, and it was beech, not hornbeam, but beech planted very close together and then growing very tall and straight because they were pushing each other up to the sky. And I was very inspired by that. So that's why we've got hornbeam down here in a straight line like this. But underneath you can see, when we clear in the winter, when we have any, we're hedging or cutting back willow or whatever we're doing, the dead wood is put in what's known as a dead hedge underneath the hornbeam, and that's a place where huge amounts of wildlife can bed down for the winter, and somewhere warm, safe and out of harm's way. If you look at the way that small birds work, they don't fly up often, they often fly sideways, so they need somewhere to get to quickly before the neighbour's cat eats them, for example. And a dead hedge like this is excellent cover for small birds, beetles and all sorts of other wildlife, which will help your biodiversity in your patch. Anyway, come on, I still haven't shown you these aphids, but I can spot them, so I'll bring you to them now. So here is a willow tree, and here it has been pollarded and pollarded. You can see we've cut it back over the years. Lovely place for birds to hang out and people to overwinter, including, look, big fat aphids, and they will sit there all winter, and we have them all over the place. You just get your eye in and you can see them everywhere, and they will spend the winter here, and they will provide enormous amount of very high protein food for birds, bees, and look, can you see there are wasps in here? A lot of wasps. The wasps will be eating, oh, I don't know if it's focusing on the wasps. The wasps are great friends in the garden, and they will be eating these aphids. Imagine it be like a huge steak. I wonder if there's a wasp's nest around here, or whether they're just foraging. No, they're just foraging. But there are quite a lot of wasps, so they will be eating some of these aphids, as well as taking honey sap from the tree. Here's another of our regularly pollarded willows outside Granny's house. Granny lives in the much done up old tractor shed here. And do you remember in the spring, I made a short about Fabrizio making a bird's house to put into this willow, and you could see, if you scroll back, you'll find it, and you'll see that this willow was pollarded, so none of these stems were here, not one of these stems were here, and this is how much a willow can grow in one season. It's amazing, isn't it? If a plant likes it in a place, then it will do well. So all of this gets counted. The wreaths I'm making are bases, so it doesn't matter about colour, because they'll be covered up. So I'm literally counting up to make sure that I can make 250 of them, 3 stems each. I think I've got enough. But it's worth walking around the garden to check. Otherwise I'd take the commission, get the money, and then can't supply. Yes, there's the bird's nest. Can you see it? I'm not sure any birds have spent much time in there. But people have. Because you can see that the edges of it are worn. So there has been action there. It may not have been a house, but I'm sure it's been a resting place. Now up here, there may not be much in the way of flowers, but there's plenty to cut for Christmas. Come on, I'll show you. Now I'm not offering my variegated holly for sale, because although I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of them, they're very slow growing, and I tend to hammer them for my own work every year, so they never look as if they've got any particularly long stems. They're good for me, and I love, and they're covered in berries. They've had a really good year. And I love this yellow-edged one because I don't like the dark of winter. So I love a bit of yellow because it cheers me up no end. But I'm not selling this. I'm keeping this to put in my own commissions. If I were going to sell it, I'd have to cut very long stems. And A, I haven't got long stems, but B, it's mine. Mine. This lovely grass, however, I've got masses of this, and I'm happy to sell a bit of this. It's beautiful. If you dry it standing up, I'll see if I can. If you dry it standing up, then it dries with its seed heads splayed open, which is very attractive and sort of dramatic, like a firework. If you dry it hanging down, it dries with the seed head closed, which is a much more modest and elegant, perhaps elegant way to dry them. So you can choose with your grasses which way you dry them. This way takes more space and they get more tangled. This way less space but less drama. Your choice. There are lots of seed heads around the garden which I've not cut, but which would make lovely additions to wreathing for Christmas wreaths. These Veronicastrum are absolutely fantastic, and I've been cutting them for weeks and hardly made a dent. So I hope my client would like a few. I think they're really fantastic, but equally I will be cutting a few today for my work that I've got to do this afternoon. Another clip coming up. Now behind me is my curly whirly willow, and we pollard this in the winter in the same way that we pollard the rest of our willow. But it's a fiddle to handle if you're making bundles of it. So in order to speed things up, I have offered my client the whole tops of these trees. So I'm going to pollard them, and he'll take the whole, I hope, he may not take the whole lot, it's quite a lot, but just take the whole top of a tree. And then they can cut it up as they need it. The material will last longer and work better because it's attached to the trunk and will need less management. This may or may not happen, but it's a nice idea. Curly willow is fantastic. The leaves haven't fallen off yet. The leaves fall off my ordinary willow much more quickly than they do off the curly willow. This is the last to lose its leaves, so there'll be leaves right up until December on this. I don't want to have to pull the leaves off for my client, so we'll see. But you can see how curly willow is so great structurally in the winter, because once it has dropped its leaves, for those of you who've been around my channel for a while, you'll know this is called twiggery pokery. I'm a keen fan of lots of twiggery pokery in the winter. And without the leaves are a bit bashed and battered and not looking their best. But isn't that a lovely shape? And a good colour. There's a little rusty bronze in there along with the bright green. Very, very good in floristry. Much desired. There you go. So next up, excellent at this time of year, the sedum. Lovely dark red. It will keep fading between now and Christmas, but it'll keep the principles of the colour will be strong. So when you put it in a wreath, you'll have that kind of glowy dark red in there, which is really fantastic. And you don't need very much. So, for example, here is one sedum head, and you could make a really enormous wreath with lots of this, but actually what people mostly do is use a little bit at a time in their wreath, because otherwise it's too heavy, and it makes really, really lovely wreathing material. So if you have sedum in your garden, I highly recommend it. If you come on my wreathing workshops, I expect you'll find me using some. It's good, isn't it? Off we go. And obviously don't forget your hydrangeas. Now these have been a bit weathered, but again, if you're making a wreath, you will very likely, that's too big in one. Well, I mean, you might be making an enormous wreath of lots of hydrangea heads. That's fine. Very pretty, yes. And if I rustled through this, I would probably find enough what I would call clean heads to make a nice wreath. But most people will be making a wreath with lots of different ingredients in, and so they too will be using it a little bit at a time, and just tying it into their wreath or their garland or whatever they're making in little pieces. So I will I've offered up my hydrangea heads, but obviously it's very important I'm clear about the condition of my flower heads. So I've been very clear that they are a bit wind battered, and I hope that my client won't mind, because most people will cut their bits up into smaller pieces like this and have them. I mean, imagine how pretty, just down your table, little bits of dried hydrangea. This now, if I brought this into the house, this would just dry. I wouldn't put it in water or anything. It would just dry off and keep its colour in the short term. Keep its colour through Christmas and the New Year, happily. By the end of the year, by the end of 12 months, it would have gone brown. If I put it on a wreath on a back door or a front door or outside and it gets frosted or very weather beaten, it'll go brown. But if it's a protected door, it'll keep its colour for a bit. That's pretty, isn't it? Honestly, but hey, no, I know. Winter weddings? Don't mind if I do, madam. So I've photographed all of these, and I'm going to go back into the studio now and send an email to my client with a list of what I've got as options, a list of prices, and suggested delivery dates, and so on. And I hope I think we're actually the 25th of October, so I could have done this before, but actually this is just right for me. My season finished at the end of September. I've spent October kind of catching up with myself, a few last events and last bits of floristry, beginning to tidy up the garden, I've lifted the dahlias, I've put all the annuals on the compost heap, and so I'm ready now to think about Christmas. It's half term, so I'm having that break with the kids. So I don't want to be working too hard because the kids are around and I'd like to see them and have outings and do activities. But they go back. So then the beginning of November, I've got to get the tulips in. So I'd really like to know I've got this order sorted out, because then I've got my wreath workshops and demos to do. I hope I have this big order to deliver. And then it's Christmas. Oh yes, it is. Anyway, have a walk around the garden and see what you can find that you might be planning ahead for your Christmas wreathing or decorating your house. I know I'm in deep shadow, but these look lovely backlit. I'll just get out of the way. Have a walk around and see what you've got that you might use for your Christmas in advance, or that somebody might like to buy from you. You could make some money. And make the most of these lovely afternoons. I'm very much conscious that I'm standing here soaking up the vitamin D on the back of my neck. And if you can do the same, your bones will be stronger for it. Anyway, have a lovely afternoon, everybody. I now need to cut for an arrangement I'm doing, so watch out for the next clip, because it'll be coming up shortly. Bye.